This episode is brought to you by Snapple. Want to know another Snapple fact? The first hot air balloon passengers were a sheep, a duck, and a rooster. Ridiculous. Check out Snapple.com to find ridiculously flavored Snapple near you.
Look, Bumble knows you're exhausted by dating. All the, must not take yourself too seriously, and 6'1" since that matters, and what do I even say other than, hey? Well, that's why they're introducing an all-new Bumble, with exciting features to make compatibility easier, starting the chat better, and dating safer. They've changed, so you don't have to. Download the new Bumble now.
Matt, a couple weeks ago, we did the Al Music, the second of the 3 Al Musics that Al did for MuchMusic. Yeah. And if you recall in that episode, I literally had to text a friend in the middle of it because I was 99% sure that their face had shown up in an Ask Al segment. And as promised, Sean S.J. the Wordburglar Jordan is now here. And before we dive into this crazy episode of Al Music, we have to ask the question that I know both of us have been wondering about.
That the whole world has been waiting to hear the answer. Like,
how did this happen?
Yeah.
How did you end up doing an Ask Al segment for MuchMusic?
Sometimes the universe serves you up a plate of lasagna and you just have to eat it. Lifelong Weird Al fan. I think this was maybe I'm on the 1993 Al Music, which would have been the second one. Mm-hmm. And look, they were filming downtown Halifax, which was my neighborhood. Like, I grew up like maybe 5-minute walk from where they shot that spot of me asking Al the question, I know you're a big star and everything, but do you ever take time out to talk to the little people? Which of course segues beautifully, seamlessly, you might say, into his interview with quotations with Prince. And yeah, I don't know what happened. People with the camera, they saw me. They said, hey, would you want to be on MuchMusic? And I was like, yeah, of course. And then they said, this is for Al TV. And I think they were maybe surprised. I remember being like, are you kidding me? I love Weird Al, I could go into some Weird Al tales of the playground. Clearly remember being very young and telling somebody that Weird Al was better than Milli Vanilli on the playground. For our listeners who may not be old enough to remember, Milli Vanilli were super popular for like a minute in time. And this happened to be around the time that I had like my first Weird Al tape. I was super into Weird Al. I think it was Even Worse I had at the time, which had like lasagna on it.
Yeah.
And I remember saying that Weird Al was better than Milli Vanilli. And this kid took such offense that he like started screaming at me, Weird Al sucks. He then got like the playground to start chanting at me, Weird Al sucks. And they just kind of followed me around the playground, and me just like this little kid, nerdy Weird Al fan. And I didn't care. I was just laughing. I was like, no, Milli Vanilli sucks. So to be honest with you, that was like a very, defining moment of my childhood.
The question I'm sure on everybody's ears is, a year or two later when The Truth of Milli Vanilli came out, did you track down that kid and say, I told you so?
I to this day, I think it's given me sort of this quiet, like, just trust your instincts. Just like what you want to like. And I mean, that's been my whole, life. And like with my music, which is definitely inspired by Weird Al. I mean, Wordburglar starts with a W so that I could be as close to Weird Al in the record store as possible.
I think that's what the naming of Wheatus was too. I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, of course. We're all trying to be close to Al. That's all we're trying to do.
That's right.
I mean, I love that story. Talk about being vindicated by history, man. Like that.
Man. Yeah.
The idea, imagine someone being that outraged now. Like, talk about a hot take being reversed. The idea that anyone now would say that Milli Vanilli was better than Weird Al in 2024.
Dude, yeah, it was the whole playground, and they just, and there was a time, especially, when people were like, oh, Weird Al's not real music, but obviously history has shown us that Weird Al, he famously, we could go. You guys have a whole podcast about it, obviously.
Yeah.
Go on about it, but I've seen him live a bunch of times. He's such an incredible performer.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm just like, I've been waiting to talk to some people about Weird Al.
well,
Really,
boy,
since that
you've come to the
playground,
right place.
finally.
Sean, I am promising you already 5.5 minutes in, this is not your only appearance on the Weird Algorithm podcast. I do want to give a quick shout out because, man, in a million years, I didn't expect Milli Vanilli to come up on this episode.
I know.
There is a great podcast that just finished releasing yesterday at the time that we're recording it called Blame It on the Fame. That is like a docu-series on the Milli Vanilli story. And it is, for those of you who don't know, those two guys really kind of were the sacrificial lamb for a totally different egotistical douchebag.
Yes.
So definitely check out that podcast. We talked about it briefly on this show too, but that does not negate the fact that Sean was right. Weird Al is better than Milli Vanilli, no matter what happened to those nice boys.
No question. No question.
So let's dive into this because there is so much to digest. And Matt, we had this YouTube version, which we always hate when we have to work with the YouTube version because it cuts out all these great music video bits.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm not as upset as I normally would be because this is the only time we're doing Much Music before we did the Al TV, and we have that archive for all the Al TVs. So I'm sure we'll see if not all of the things that we missed here. But this is also interesting because I think this is the only Much Music where we're seeing the fake interviews for the first time before they play on Al TV, which we'll cover after Bad Hair Day.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, Sean, because we've been watching all of these in a row, like this is the first of the Much Music ones that is, I think, almost entirely, if not entirely, original content. He often would grab pre-recorded, like his interviews and stuff were from older segments, and he would bring them back. Of course, I mean, this is a lot of, for what's essentially like at the time was a one and done, like 3-hour block probably that they were never gonna, really rebroadcast. The amount of work that goes into this, and this again, I think every bit of this special was new footage, which was really amazing. They put a lot into this.
Yeah. Now,
It's
Matt,
phenomenal. Yeah.
Matt, I finally am on your side. Al is definitely killing the VJs every Al music to take over the...
In the last one, the VJ dies and it's like, oh, maybe he choked or something like that. Matt thought it was an accident. I was like, no, Al is murdering VJs to get on screen. And I was definitely right because this time,
was undeniable.
He gets handed a bottle of what sulfuric acid it is. Yeah. And again, Al goes back to the bit of like, oh, that's too bad. Well, we're all going to remember. We'll all never forget whoever he was.
Yeah.
I mean, I have to say, watching it just quickly to that note about poisoning and murdering, like it was a bit. It's watching it now. It feels like, oh, this is that edgier Weird Al. I mean, we've all seen UHF and all the pranks and blood and jokes and everything. Conan the Librarian cutting a guy in half. But like, considering this was a show that was like, it felt like it was live at the time. Mm-hmm. Like, it was pretty edgy. Also, a bit of language that I was a bit like, whoa, dude. Like,
there's definitely some edginess in here.
There's
also
sex jokes that are in this that I was like, oh my God, Al.
There's also right away, I love, because again, it's so fun to see. Al, of course, has this reputation for being just the nicest guy in showbiz, right? Like that is now how he is known. So it's so fun to watch him just taking shots like he does back then. I think people forget, like he can be really pointed.
Well, and we have to talk about this first one because he's doing like the RSVP segment, which was like the request it videos. Mm-hmm. And someone says, could you play Buddy Holly by Weezer? And he just goes, no, they suck, which is such an obvious dig at the fact that they rescinded their alternative Polka approval on him like right before Bad Hair Day came out.
No one would have known that at this time. No. This is amazing to revisit because
I had no idea.
When Al recorded the alternative Polka, in the middle of it, there was a snippet of Buddy Holly that Weezer, I guess, initially said yes to, and then at the last minute, they pulled the permission.
So I think it was. If you look in the liner notes, it still thanks Rivers and all the members of Weezer in the alternative polka, and it wasn't until like 10 years ago that he just dropped the 20-second clip on YouTube for people to listen to like what it sounds like.
So they managed to recover it in some way, but Al actually said there's a little bit of fun, like music from the 90s music trivia. He said it was so last minute that they literally had to splice the Buddy Holly bit of the polka out of the master tape, like physically cut the tape to remove just the Buddy Holly portion of that track because they were so close to going to the presses with the record. So, and Rivers did come out later and he said, like, I was young and insecure and it was so stupid and I regret saying no. I should have said yes. And I guess Al was a little salty, so he threw in a dig at Weezer that, that made me laugh really hard right away.
That's amazing. Move over Drake Kendrick.
Yeah, I know, right? Rivers and Al, this is the beef we need to be cultivating.
Now, Sean, this is where you're very helpful to have on here because obviously the whole world of MuchMusic is just a giant question mark for Matt and I. I'm assuming that this woman doing the pirate dancing bit that he keeps cutting to was some type of prominent VJ on that channel at one point because I could find nothing about her.
Was that in Speaker's Corner?
Maybe. It was Nicole...
Natalie Rouchard, I think
Natalie
is the name.
Rouchard was the name of the person. And he goes, I want to see Natalie Rouchard dancing a pirate jig. And it just cuts to her in a pirate outfit with like an eye patch and there's like accordion music playing and she's just dancing for a couple minutes. And then he goes back to it later. He's like, hey, let's go back to see what Natalie's up to.
I don't know if she was a VJ, actually. Of all the VJs, or maybe she just worked at MuchMusic. I'm not sure.
I did Google this. I think she was French and hosted a specific French portion called French Kiss. Was there a show called French Kiss on MuchMusic?
There was, and there's also the French station called Musique Plus, I believe was the name of it, where they had basically it was like the MuchMusic studio just in Quebec. And it was for all because the Quebec music scene is huge, and they would break stars just within Quebec would go like huge. So that was like a whole other market. But yeah, French, that explains it because French Kiss was not a show that I was that familiar with.
There you go. Good job finding it, Matt. I tried Googling that name and I could not figure out who that was.
I cracked the code just now. Sorry. I had to throw MuchMusic. I had to throw MuchMusic in the search results and then it gave it to me.
Well done.
So I am excited. Like I said, there's some stuff that I'm bummed. I really hope that when we watch Al TV, you and I get to experience whatever his Friends of P full video situation is because talk about a deep cut song that he's like attacking in the grand scheme of all the other songs he messes with.
I know. Also, just another funny note of like, so again, the Weezer thing happens, right? And Weezer cut the song and then he plays the Rentals, which is Matt Sharp, the original bass player of Weezer, who famously quit the band, but not until after this. It was so funny because he hears like, it's like Rentals, Friends of P. Isn't that also feature one of those guys from Weezer? I guess that guy's pretty cool. We'll play that one. And I honestly thought for a second, I'm like, is he referencing the fact that Matt just quit this band and that's why he's cool? But he's not. It's a total coincidence. That's a deep cut for him to opt to slam Buddy Holly, but then play the Rentals. And maybe that's Al giving an olive branch in his own way. I don't actually know, but it was funny.
We get more musicians added to the Runaway Train missing musicians portion. Right Said Fred, Rick Springfield, Tiffany, and Huey Lewis are the new additions. And then we get I love that Al repeats so many segments across these, but like it always works. So in this one, he gets another heartfelt letter about like a brother in a coma and like all he wants is please just play Whitney Houston's The Greatest Love of All. We really think that just hearing this song might bring about the coma. And he says, well, that's the kind of thing I'd love to do, but we are running short on time. So moving on to the next request.
I love happening within the first 5 minutes of what was probably 3 hours of television. Just no time.
It's
and then
so
again,
good.
to follow that up, he goes right from there into this unbelievably long-winded, the joke. I mean, again, someone saying like, can you play Crazy by Aerosmith? And he goes, we don't have time to play Crazy, so I'll just give you the summary. And then Al proceeds to just describe the whole thing like in real time over the video. He is just talking over the track.
It's amazing. Now that video, if I remember correctly, it was a really long music video, right?
Yes.
So I think that
it was a solid 5 or 6 minute video. He He also says the word sluts like 8 times while describing the video.
There are, as always with these things, there's a couple moments that you're just like, oh my God, dude.
A few things
that's really
aged real bad.
I know. Yeah.
Because he's always sweet. It's Al. We love Al. Like, and they're like, oh my God, that word is like a dagger in my ear right now.
It is shocking to hear him referred to.
Yeah,
that was like cable TV. That was on every kid's. Like, this is what watching. When you era of movies, right? Like every other movie, you hear that word. Yeah. It's in everything. I mean, it's like everything. Kevin Smith films, anything. Oh, yeah. You go back watch Mallrats. It's like, whoa.
I've talked about that. Maybe not on this show, but on other shows too. It's like, it's shocking how not far back you have to dig even for like the R and F word to just like predominantly regularly show up in a movie. And like now it feels so weird if you hear it in like something modern. You're just like, whoa, you couldn't come up with something else. Jesus. Yeah. Like it's really startling. That being said, I would legit want to own I went to the Oscars and you didn't loser t-shirt. I just when he shows that off for his reason for going to the Oscars is to get that sweet shirt, I was like, absolutely. And then his
shirt, and also he notes the free tacos at the after party.
That is true. He gets free tacos.
And that he gets to throw spitballs at Barbra Streisand's head from the back.
He also gets a great joke that probably doesn't make that much sense to people who weren't there at the time. But the Beatles Anthology 17 joke is so funny because they were just like, it was like in 1 year they cranked out 3 Beatles anthology records. And they really are, if you have those CDs, like there's some awesome like demos of songs. But then there's also just like, here's a minute of them just chattering in the studio before they record a song.
There's also a great thing there with that. Did you notice that the person who asks that question, he was like, hi, I'm David. Are you a huge Beatles fan? And that's the setup to the anthology joke. Yeah. I am almost positive that was David Cassidy.
Oh.
I think it was David Cassidy from the Partridge Family who asked that. And Al just goes like, oh, thanks, David, and just doesn't say a word. But I would bet, and I looked, stopped it right away. I was like, that is David Cassidy, for sure. And I just love that they make no mention of it. There's no, like, name drop. Considering how many celebrities Al fakes into his show, the fact that David Cassidy appears and doesn't even get a last name and he's just like a here and gone, that made me laugh.
Funny. Well, speaking of fakes and the Beatles, we get to the Paul McCartney interview from here. And this is, to me, a classic Al interview where the whole time you can't help but wonder, what the hell was this original interview that these Paul clips are taken from? Like, what was being asked of him in the first place? Because at some points he reminds me of Fred Willard in A Mighty Wind. Like he's just got this like, hey, what happened energy the whole time that it cuts to him. And I would love to try, like, that's like the next evolution of this podcast, Matt, is we have to track down what the original interviews were that he pulled for these.
Yeah.
I was wondering that too. I wonder if it was an actual MuchMusic interview. Now, MuchMusic was part of Chum TV, which had they were affiliated with other networks here in Canada. So I'm not quite sure how like MTV worked, but with MuchMusic, they may have had access to they were in a big building on Queen West, where years later, Matt, where our connection would begin when I first met
Jonathan
at Silver Snail Comics
Silver
Store,
Snail
which
Comics.
I worked at 2 blocks away from MuchMusic, where Al Music happened. So I was just getting closer and closer. I was just a dozen years away from when this was filmed. But I'm wondering, because they had like a news, there was like an entertainment channel. There were all these other channels associated. So I'm wondering if they had the rights, if Al had the rights to use that footage, like if that was actual MuchMusic footage.
I think that's the case. There was one interview, and I can't remember who it was. I definitely didn't write it down, but one of them specifically notes, maybe it was Mick Jagger, jumping ahead a little bit, but who says like, oh, I'll be back to MuchMusic sometime, which was like, okay. I think what he had access to was just the totally unedited raw footage of these interviews, which allowed him to get, again, he uses them We're going to get to it. He uses them in different ways as it goes on. But like even the weird random, like the shaky
when he says
camera,
he tickles the camera guy and
he tickles the camera guy and the weird zooms and stuff. And also just these people looking bored and off into the distance. Like I think some of the shots that he uses were things that were like pre or post interview that they never really thought were going to make it to air.
Yeah.
Which is, again, I'm consistently blown away by the access that he got to make this stuff. Not only, again, having access to this like footage of these big stars and allowing them to look like absolute morons on his show, but then him being allowed to like mess with the videos and like insert himself into videos to yell over the tops of videos. Like this was really like Wild West times. I don't think anyone was. There was no rules about what you could and couldn't do.
This one's real heavy on also just throwing his parody song underneath the original video. Like we get that with like TLC. He does that for Phony Calls. It's just the TLC video with his song underneath it. There's one that I'll get to later because I tracked down the version that he played just to get a grasp on it a little bit. But like my favorite part from the Paul McCartney one is he says like, well, tell me, Paul, do you like jazz or classical? And then it just cuts to Paul McCartney goes, I don't like jazz. I don't like classical. And like the way he says it, it's like, what is this interview that's happening here?
It's so weird. It's so, the other one that I loved is he says like towards the very end, he was like, oh, Paul, very successful. I heard that you used to be very popular with the females. And then it cuts to McCartney going, yeah, not just humans either.
And then he still dunks on Milli Vanilli in that interview. It's 1996. It happened like 5 years ago, and he still gets a dig in there.
It's a good example. People still aren't over it. I mean, we're still talking about Milli Vanilli to this day.
Yeah,
it is still,
right.
it's still such a thing. Such a thing.
Well, because it's that never-ending battle of who's better, Milli Vanilli or Weird Al Yankovic, just has not ceased for 30
Still
years.
not settled.
We got to settle that. The amount of editing that goes into that, just looking at it, and also thinking this is like analog editing back then, right? I know there's like a gag in this episode about the internet. So I was like, oh yeah, the internet was just starting to be
Oh my God. Let's talk about that real quick. He promotes, he says he's going to promote John Bermuda Schwartz's great website. And he says, but we don't have a lot of time, so get a pen and paper. And this thing flashes for literally a millisecond. Like, it is so quick. And again, the great gag is like, right now, if we wanted to, I chose not to, but if we wanted to, we could like pull the cursor back, pause, and like get the web address. You couldn't when you were watching MuchMusic live. Like,
I did manage to freeze frame it and find it. It was like loop.com/Bermuda/index.html. Honestly, it might have actually been real. Or it might have been like a version of a way to get to a website. I don't know. This was pretty early to be a.
That's early internet, so that could have been in the same realm as like a GeoCities or an Angel Fire website.
It very well could have been, yeah.
GeoCities.
And also, I love the bit of like, then Al goes to the MuchMusic website. And it has a thing of like what's on now or like what's on, and he hits the button and it's just like a webcam of him.
Oh, it's like a
on
full
the show
Spaceballs bit.
Yeah, exactly. Which I just love the idea of. At that time, that was such an absurd idea that you could go to the website and click what's on and show the TV show. And now that is so normal, like such a totally average, regular thing to have happen. And in this, Al is like horrified that he's just like, oh, look at that. There I am.
It's wild. I mean, all of this stuff, I can only imagine Al now just looking at YouTube and saying, I did that first. I did that first.
Well,
like, whether it's bad lip reading or the parodies or the fake interview clips and like it's unreal how ahead of like this was YouTube back then, right?
Oh, totally.
I mean, you guys know that. Yeah.
One of my favorite episodes we've ever done in this podcast was literally having Paul Scheer confirm like, Al created essentially what all of modern comedians are doing now, like with all
a form of like proto sketch comedy, but like also a very absurdist, surreal sketch comedy that was really not a thing so much, especially back to the 80s, which is when he started doing these shows.
But also pulling from even older stuff, like these interviews. I don't know if I've said this before, but if I haven't, it's something I definitely clocked this time, is like all he's doing with these interviews is like a modernized version of what Dickie Goodman was doing in like the 60s and 70s when he would do those novelty records like Mr. Jaws, where he would be like interviewing the shark from Jaws, and the shark spoke in just sound clips from classic records of that time. Like,
oh, that's funny. I'm not familiar with that.
Oh, it's not particularly funny, but it was like Mr. Jaws was like a top 20 hit in like the summer of 75.
We are here on the beach where a giant shark has just eaten a girl swimmer. Well, Mr. Jaws, how was it? Dynamite! And what did she say when you grabbed her?
Please, mister, please.
I know sharks are stupid, but what did you think when you took that first bite?
How sweet it is.
Mr. Jaws, before you swim out to sea, have you anything else to say?
Why can't we be friends? Why can't we?
But that's absolutely, there's no doubt in my mind that that's what he's pulling inspiration from.
Interesting.
It's because he would do, it was like every year he would find a different thing to do, like a interview with this celebrity of the time.
Right.
And then would just use music cues to like have all the answers.
And what a unique position for him to be in. So just at that time to have access to all that gear, which now we can just have in a phone.
Exactly.
But like being into MuchMusic, getting access to the footage, editing, the musical, like he was in such a unique, that comedy music pocket that like nobody else, like maybe a handful of other acts were floating around at the time, but he was just like, it's unreal.
And kind of
work
untouchable.
In. Like, I mean, a lot of work again to do it like this. Like he really put a tremendous amount. Like he could have not. This is all just promotional material, and he really leaned into this side of his career in a way that I think a lot of his peers wouldn't have even considered.
No, and I think that's why he gets away with doing whatever the hell he wants. You know what I mean? Because like if you're MuchMusic, right? Here's this dude who's probably putting in more hours of work than he's getting paid to be there.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And like, are you gonna get upset if Billy Corgan from Smashing Pumpkins is upset that he like talked over top of the 1979 video once? Like, you're gonna side with Al at that point. He's like, Billy Corgan, what have you actually done for us? Like, Al came here and self-produced 2 hours of content.
Yeah, why don't you come in and look through the archives, Billy Corgan?
And I mean, people actually thought Al was Canadian because MuchMusic would repeat this. Like, I feel like Al Music would come on every few months. They'd bring it back. Like, Al Music's coming back again. And he was basically an honorary Canadian. I mean, and MuchMusic, too, at the time. I mean, you guys, I'm sure you know this, but there was like the CanCon rule that required Canadian content. So MuchMusic broke so many Canadian bands that really were getting no traction in the U.S. But like,
and he reflects that too. He has the CanCon alarm go off in the middle of the special.
That's right.
Which, like, love telling the story because I think it's so funny. But the McKenzie brothers of SCTV was literally created to mock the CanCon law because they were being told that SCTV didn't have enough Canadian content, and they're like, it's a sketch show with all Canadians. Like, how much more Canadian can it get? And then basically Dave Thomas and Rick Moranis in an act of defiance basically said, like, hang a Canadian flag, give us a case of beer, and just turn on the camera. And they would just improvise the most offensive, stereotypical Canadian shit. And then they just be like, there's your 10 minutes of Canadian content for every hour of SCTV.
I mean, and Al's version of that I love for this is him going, it's like, oh, that's the CanCon alarm. It means we haven't been doing enough Canadian content. So we should take a moment to shine a light on a lesser known Canadian artist. Here's Alanis Morissette. Really good. Really good.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
We get what I think might be the most brutal and violent Harvey segment I've seen in a really long time, where he tosses this, I mean, obviously a fake, but tosses this hamster into a giant wheel, spins it around, and then slam dunks it into a bucket of water.
So much so that there has never been disclaimers like that with Harvey, like multiple times on the screen, like, please don't worry, this hamster, no hamsters were harmed in the making of this bit.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
This episode is supported by FX's The Bear. The Emmy award-winning hit series returns, following Carmi, Sydney, and Richie as they do what it takes to elevate The Bear, their fine dining establishment, to the highest level, all while doing their best just to stay in business. FX's The Bear. All episodes now streaming, only on Hulu.
Looking for a new seasonal anime? Want to know what new anime music is out there? Looking to add a new waifu or husbando to the list? Or are you just looking for a modern or classic anime to add to your plan to watch list? My name is Nick and I run the Waifus and Weeboos podcast. And you can check me out on Geekscape.net.
This is a very interview-heavy episode, honestly, because then we get this Billy Joel interview, which I didn't write too many notes down, but I did get a big kick out of Willie the Weasel Face Dog Boy as his new name for Billy Joel. But this is the segment I want to talk about. We go to the cavity search bit, which
you're moving his teeth, yeah.
Well, he's playing. What I saw was the beginning of Hold Me, Thrill Me, Kiss Me, Kill Me. But then he does the bit that he does every episode where he's like, oh, play that back again, play that back again. And you can still hear the U2 track playing, but I was like, that's the ending of Geek Stink Breath by Green Day. Like, that's very much it. So I Googled.
Oh, I didn't catch that.
So I Googled Weird Al cavity search, and the first half of the video is just the YouTube video as you remember it, with Al's song over top of it. And then right after the chorus, when it gets into like the drills and stuff, it is like every 2 seconds it changes clips from any music video or movie or anything that he could find with a dentist. So you get like Steve Martin from Little Shop of Horrors. You get like the weird teeth from the Bjork Army of Me video. You get the Green Day, the guy in the dentist chair. So like, I was like, the amount of time and effort it must have took to track down, because some of it's just like 50s educational video clips that he like pulled together. And when I'm telling you, it's just like clip, 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 clip for like 45 seconds straight.
Wow.
I was like, this dude is a madman. Like,
That's a tremendous amount of work. I mean, good catch with the Green Day thing. I did not notice that at all.
I've watched that video a lot.
And again, I just can't get over that. Like, he is allowed to like essentially do video mashups that then get broadcast on television like that. Like, that's the sort of thing that someone would do today on YouTube and maybe get a copyright strike for.
Yeah, 100%.
I mean, they're cutting the proof is there on these videos. They're actually, for YouTube, people are removing the music video content because they don't want to get a strike.
Yeah, they're worried about the strikes.
And Al was just like, whatever you want. They were like, whatever you want, help yourself to our basement full of footage. And here's the tape splicing machine. Go nuts.
And speaking of it being a Green Day video, I think I actually might try to make a Billy Joe Armstrong hand dial thing that he has, because that thing was
the
awesome.
hair color wheel?
Yeah, the hair color wheel. I'm like, that's not that hard to make. Like, I might actually try to build one of those just for shits and giggles, because it's so funny. Like,
yeah.
And the question was, I'm a huge Green Day fan, but I can never remember what color Billy Joe's hair is at any given day.
Yeah, and it's lined up based on like the month of the year and the moon cycle. It was all these weird parameters to decide what color Billy Joe's hair would be. And then Al, I think, says something like best $300 I ever spent.
Yeah. He gets another diss into, I think Madonna, he calls out her changing her hairstyle too much as well.
He does.
But we're not there yet. First, we got to talk about this Mariah Carey interview, which literally has a point where the camera just points at her chest and sits there for a little bit. And again, I said, ow.
but again, I think he's making fun of the foot. Like, he's using the footage that he gets given, right? Yeah. So I think he's trying to highlight, like, what is this?
Like, what?
It's so...
It's so I mean, crazy. That was, the Mariah thing was funny. He did keep playing up that joke about her being like, oh, you're so pretty. You're such a good voice. So pretty, such a good voice. And And I mean, hey, look, I was a kid at the time. I had a crush on Mariah Carey.
Of
Everybody
course,
had a crush on Mariah
And
Carey.
he just keeps saying that, and he keeps cutting to her going, and she's just like, I know.
Yeah.
Well, you're just
I
so
love that
talented. I know.
There's the bit where he's just waiting for her to get done in the makeup chair so that she can come out. And then she has a line that I've heard her say in many radio interviews as well, where she says, like, I really shouldn't be doing this. I should be resting my voice. And he just goes, oh, you'll talk.
Yeah, just he disarms you, right? Like he'll throw out a few jokes that are just kind of like, okay, that's kind of funny. That's a little silly. That one didn't hit the mark. Then he'll just go left so hard, and it's just killer. Like
I know.
That's the Al that is just fire.
Well, that's what makes him the best, right?
Yeah.
Another bit that we get in everything, whether it's an Al Music or an Al TV, is his food recommendation. This time it's Cheetos, soy milk, and Vaseline on rye bread. And then he takes 2 or 3 big hearty bites out of this thing. The way that this man suffers for our entertainment is truly...
I mean, can you eat Vaseline?
That's what I was. I'm like, is it jelly technically?
Yeah,
I mean, I guess your
but
skin absorbs it, so it's technically you could ingest it.
But isn't it literally the name of the product is petroleum jelly?
Yeah.
Isn't it made of petroleum?
All right,
Which does not make it seem edible to me.
Good. Kids at home, do not eat Vaseline.
Look, guys, we're going to do a little research now and find out if you can eat Vaseline. But no matter what Matt Kelly is about to find, I'm still going to say I don't recommend you do this.
So it says, while Vaseline meets FDA requirements for human consumption, it is generally not toxic when swallowed in small amounts, but it's still not recommended to eat it. So it's possible that I'll put actual Vaseline on there for at least that bit.
Oh, man.
I mean, hopefully, what would it have been if it wasn't Vaseline? The prop department must have made, I don't know,
some sort of a clear, gloopy. We can't think about it too much.
No,
like
we
a
shouldn't.
hair.
I don't know.
Yeah, we gotta move past
We're
that.
gonna have to move on.
We get an awesome live performance after this of Since You've Been Gone featuring the Silhouette Singers.
Yes, that was fun. That was fun to see a little to be honest, I could not fully tell if Al was actually singing on that track or if that was just
I think
him.
they just played the song
I think that was
and
just
he's
him
lip
singing
syncing
along to the studio recording.
Yeah.
It was still fun to see any sort of it's fun to see him doing this Bad Hair Day material because we haven't really seen any of that yet of him actually promoting this stuff.
And it's all over this. Every commercial break, it's playing I Remember Larry or Everything You Know Is Wrong in the background.
I'm so sick of you. All the little instrumental bits they're throwing in here. It's great.
Feels real heavy on promoting.
It does.
More than anything else we've seen. The only thing that I thought may have been reused was the Robert Plant interview. That felt familiar to me.
I don't remember ever seeing this.
Okay.
I don't remember.
It's possible that I was wrong.
Yeah.
I also was just like, how could he have so much new material in one
I know.
episode?
I don't think we had seen the Robert Plant one. I mean, I love the joke of how he left Led Zeppelin because he really wanted to play guitar for Air Supply.
Yeah.
That's another great, very topical of the time joke. And again, just him doing it's like, oh, and you also wanted to do duets with Barry Manilow, which Robert Plant describes Barry Manilow as a raging monster loony nutter. And then Al, of course, well, yeah, we all know that about Barry, of course.
That's obvious. I'll run down real quick the tour dates because we get a bunch of great ones here. We got Wacky Wally's Waffle World, the Tennis Elbow fundraiser, the Chuck E. Cheese parking lot. The Taste Like Chicken show got canceled for FDA issues, but the Giggly Goo Goose Comedy Hut show is still on, as well as the Stop and Putt miniature golf course, Mr. Frank's Poodle Wash. They have to go back home for some laundry. And then it's Crazy Louie's Bowling Alley and Liposuction Clinic, the Don Knotts Beef Barn. He's going to play at the anniversary of Fred and Louis Fiedelsteins. And then, of course, a sold-out month at the Sky Dome going all the way up to the 32nd.
Yes.
Now, can I ask you two, as Al scholars?
Oh, sure.
Does he stop to do laundry on tour? Yes.
Yeah, I do. We all do. You need to.
Do.
That's the hardest thing. I buy new socks when I'm on tour because it's just too hard to do laundry.
Agreed.
The names Louis and Frank seem to come up in Al lore all the time.
Louis, Frank, and Ernie, I think, are the three big ones. And also, I mean, Harvey the Wonder Hamster obviously shows up all the time, but Harvey is like Uncle Harvey in UHF. Like there are definitely 4 male names that he thinks are just instant comedy home runs.
Yeah,
it's a good question.
2000-inch TV. I mean, like
I wonder if there's a reason. I mean, there's no relation, but there is Frankie Yankovic, the other Yankovic who plays accordion, so that's something. But I mean, you just pointed out, I would have forgotten that he's promoting this record, and that is a line in Everything You Know Is Wrong, where he says, I guess, is it Uncle Frank or Cousin Louie? Those same 2 names. I'm not enough of an Al scholar to know that off the top of my head, but I'll bet anything that some family connection, there has to be some reason.
There's got to be
why
something
he goes
there.
to those names multiple times.
I'll bet there's a reason.
I love that this got muted on YouTube, but we do get a sneak peek of the Ramones video that you were talking about a couple episodes ago, Matt, where Al is in this this We Are the World type
spoof,
parody. Yeah. The taxi bit. Someone asks him, how do you properly hail a taxi? And I love that he goes, well, first you stick out your 2 fingers and you say, hey, taxi. And then he bludgeons a man to death with a tire iron, and it turns into a fake Mentos bit. It is just like every time you think you know where the bit is going, he takes it in a different direction. Because I did not see the Mentos bit coming.
No, I didn't either. Another great way to date it very properly, the Mentos ads. Yeah, no, and again, Al beats a man to death with a tire iron, and then is
soaked in
covered in blood. It's another one of those things
Carrie.
that's easy. It's easy to forget about Al, how much there is just so much violence sometimes in what he does. It's shocking when you're like, oh God, yeah, there it is.
We'll get into it because there's a couple other really bloody and upsetting moments as we keep going.
Yes.
So then we get this Madonna interview, which I thought was going to be a retro interview. I said, oh, okay.
I know, it's a new one.
And then it's a new one. Madonna describing Rosie O'Donnell, and she goes, she can be destructive, and she has multiple arms and legs and an empty stomach like a womb.
She has many arms and legs. Her empty stomach is carved out, and then she takes energy and she turns it into life. What was Madonna talking about? What could she have possibly been talking about?
And I love in this specific interview, Al is playing the part of someone who has had enough of Madonna's shtick. Like, he's just exhausted by her with every question. And this is the one I think that most does what Al does best, which is just mock self-important celebrities. And he is just... at one point, he just goes, okay, shut up.
Well, he also does he asks her for life advice, and she starts doing this rambling thing that everyone does. She's like, well, you have to be more independent and make sure that what you do is what you want to do. And as she's doing this, she just keeps looking up, up and away from the camera. And then Al starts looking up with her and being like, what are you looking at? and she just keeps just rambling on while looking up, and then he cuts her off. And then this is where we get to
some real,
maybe the dirtiest joke that I have ever heard Al make, which is that he got her recent book, which for people who don't know, Madonna's recent book at that time would have been her book called Sex, with a lot of erotic photos of her. And he says, I found your recent book at a garage sale. And for some reason, all the pages were stuck together. What gives? And it cuts to her, and she just kind of stares straight ahead and just coughs. And then it cuts away.
This aired after school.
I know.
The violence, the questionable language, the innuendo. I mean, Al, no wonder he was better than Milli Vanilli. I mean,
he's very much making some to go back to a word we said earlier, he's slut shaming Madonna a lot in this interview too. I'm just what is happening? It is insane.
Well, the dumb joke leading up to that, before he essentially asks her how many people, if there's anyone she hasn't slept with, is exactly what he asks Madonna, which was oof, that's a little tough. But before that, he's like, oh, I heard you have a baby coming soon. How did that happen? And it just cuts to Madonna, and she goes, sexual intercourse. And I was like, oh, got it. Okay, understood.
One of the best bits in any of these is Al watching the Norm Macdonald SNL joke about the Unabomber, and Al turns around and he does look exactly like the sketch. Like, I was like, oh my God, I never would have like pieced how much Al looked like that sketch until this very second.
Norm Macdonald.
R.I.P.
Genius.
Miss him greatly. I really hope
another top tier Canadian, Norm Macdonald.
Yes.
There you go.
There you go.
I really hope when we watch the LTV, we get to see whatever this Snoop Doggy Dogg voiceover bit was going to be, because I'm very curious.
I think seems like there was something there over the Snoop Dogg video. Yeah.
So the big thing that that represents the entire final third of this special is the Al's home videos of his previous tour of Canada, which literally starts with him breaking Steve J's hand for not being good enough at the bass.
I mean, I actually don't know how, like, maybe Steve is double jointed or something, that he was able to do that, because Al, first of all, it's hilarious. Like, there's like a mistake happens and Al's like, what's going on? And Steve is like, I think there might be a problem with like one of these frets up here. And Al's like, oh, really? Is that the problem? Is it one of your frets? And he
I think the problem is this.
Grabs Steve's hand, and it's like all of his fingers bend back like really uncomfortably far. And you see, it doesn't look like I can't imagine they had like a prosthetic hand. I think he might just be double jointed and be able to like pull his fingers back enough.
It was insane to watch. I screamed. I was like, oh no, not Steve.
It's such a funny thing, because this is, again, we're seeing the timing change here. And Al did reference that like MuchMusic had asked him to film this stuff, but I think we're just approaching the point now where Al being on the road in the mid 90s, he was able to get like a video camcorder and shoot stuff, because this really looks like
home videos.
Like home shot footage of these guys on the road in the 90s.
And some of it feels like stuff that he now uploads to his YouTube channel. You know what I mean? Like, there's the one part where the bit that made me laugh harder than it probably should have was the hey bit, where he's like at the very end where he's walking through a lobby and he goes, hey, and then it cuts to just a barrel of hay just sitting in this hotel lobby. And that's absolutely the type of stuff that you would see on his YouTube now.
It does seem like that.
Yeah, like if he was on tour and he got to a hotel and there was just a thing of hay, he would absolutely hand his phone to one of his bandmates and be like, film this for me real quick. I'm going to load it to YouTube and do it.
Or the bit of him in talking about how great First Class is and stretching out his legs and just kicking someone in the face ahead of him like over and over and over again.
Him being so excited of the Big Nickel, which I didn't know was an actual thing. Sean, have you gone to the Big Nickel in your life?
I have not been to the Big Nickel. There's a big chair I've seen, and I've not seen the Big Nickel.
Canada's a wild place, man.
I mean, he likes like the biggest ball of twine in Minnesota, right? Like
that makes sense.
He appreciates big things that people can just go and look at.
Yeah, very wholesome family tourism type stuff. Yeah, exactly.
He also just keeps on getting those digs at Prince, because he's doing a segment where he's explaining all the reasons why Canada is better than America. And then it just cuts to whatever the Prince's newest album was at that time. And he picks it up and he goes, the artist formerly known as Prince lives in America. Enough said. And then just puts the CD back and walks away.
Is there a beef with those guys? Sorry.
No.
Very much so.
Kind of, yeah. Prince was one of few artists who said no to Al parodying him multiple times.
Like 10 times, I think.
Yeah. And the two of them, actually both of them, like, seemingly, I mean, obviously Al must be a huge fan if he wanted to parody Prince so badly. But even Prince threw in, so as following that, Al will, I don't think there's a single one of these TV bits we have ever seen where Al does not in some way take a shot at Prince.
Yeah.
Every single time. And even Prince, we noted, did a music video where he did a gag where a guy dressed up like Weird Al has a cigar explode in his face that Prince lights at a party. Like the two of them really loved like taking shots. It seems like it was all in good fun. There's also wonderful leaked audio of Prince talking to his band so excitedly about how much he loved the Fat music video. So
track that audio down. It's a delight to listen to because he's so giggly. It's like it's the greatest thing he's ever seen in his entire life.
Oh man, he's so excited. I just to follow the reason why Canada is better than America. He makes that funny Prince joke, but then immediately after that, he says, he's like, another good example is like in Canada, they have helpful Mounties in cute uniforms riding on horses. And in the U.S., they have policemen in riot gear who beat the crap out of you. I was like, wow. Weird Al, 1994 or whatever. It's like, or 95. God, like, boy, was he, some things don't change.
That was topical.
No. That was, boy.
Sean, question for you. What was Speaker Corner normally? Because we get this bit that's clearly there to set up the alternative polka, because he's only requesting videos from every band that's in the alternative polka. But what was Speaker Corner?
So, great question. It was 24/7, a video phone booth that you could go in. I think you had to pay maybe like $1, and it would record you, and then you could be on TV. So there were people at MuchMusic every week who would go through all the footage, and then they would edit the best of Speaker's Corner, and they would use clips in between videos, in between, like during commercial breaks. They'd start with like, here's a minute of somebody on the street corner, and people would come in and play songs. They would rap, they would tell jokes. Apparently, like legend has it, multiple people made amorous love smoochy pictures and movies in there, and apparently there was a lot of that, people drinking, drugs, parties. Like, it was a huge thing, especially being like right downtown Toronto. It was a destination. If you were visiting the city, people would come from across Canada. They'd be like, hey, I'm from Alberta and I'm here to party, blah, 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 or whatever. So Speaker's Corner was a big thing, and I bet there must be best of Speaker's Corner on YouTube somewhere.
I'll try to track that down then.
Definitely,
that's a fun idea. That's such a great, like, of the time thing. I love that. Oh man.
3 things that I feel like we absolutely would be remiss if we didn't mention. The first one is there's this Ask Al segment where a guy keeps asking Al what his real name is, and it basically turns into he is some demonic alien being that's come here to like entertain.
I believe
the
Xandrox was the name.
Xandrox, I think, is correctly the name. Amazing. And then we also have to talk about the Mick Jagger followed by the Keith Richards interviews. And I'm just going to say this right here. I know I said I was curious about the Paul McCartney thing. I have no clue what Keith Richards says for like 95% of this interview.
No, well, so it's so good. Like, Al is so excited. He's like, we're going to sit down with Mick Jagger and Keith Richards of the Rolling Stones. And then it cuts to just Mick, and Al is like, where's Keith?
He's like, is Keith going to be here soon?
And Mick Jagger goes, don't blame me, blame my booker. And then every question, Al's like, God, all these questions were for Keith. I don't even know what to ask you. I love that he throws in, like, I think your name might be kind of offensive to the Irish. Yes. Is it okay if I call you Ernie?
And then at the end he goes, well, that's been my interview with Keith Richards' partner, Ernie Jagger of the Rolling Stones.
I like that a lot.
So good.
And then all of a sudden Keith shows up later, and it was like, oh, you were running late. And Keith says the later the greater, and Al then sounds like, yeah, okay, whatever. And then Keith just mumbles totally incoherently for an unbelievably long time.
Oh my God, it's insane. It's absolutely insane. There's one Mick Jagger one that I had to write down where Al goes, can you imitate a machine gun? And Mick Jagger goes, no. And he goes, well, could you imitate a machine gun with a silencer? And he goes, bang, 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 bang. Yes, that's really good. This may have been my favorite. Well, I don't know. It's hard to top when I see a friend in the middle of a MuchMusic unexpectedly. But I do think that this is my favorite of the 3 MuchMusics.
This is really great. It's also just got so much great. I loved all the behind the scenes tour footage that they had in this.
It's
that was
awesome.
Amazing. There's a very quick segment of Al sitting with the bus driver, telling him a story.
It's like Large Marge from Pee-wee's Playhouse. It's so scary.
And the driver the driver's telling him a story about how he's driving the bus one time. He's like, oh, and then I heard a sound in the back, and I went to go check it out, and I like look through the moonlight, and I just see a human head. And as he says a human head, a red light goes on, and he just lights up like a demon face, and Al just goes, ah! Like, that made me laugh so hard. And then, like, also, again, that just seems so like real to like of all of this stuff. Like that felt really genuine behind the scenes, them goofing around foot. Like I loved watching that. I also loved the insane shot of him. I thought it was a joke. He was like, "Oh, it's a big day for me. We're doing an autograph signing at the Super Bear supermarket." And I was like, ha ha ha, that's funny. But I think that's really what happened.
Yeah, he's at an actual
I think they did an
autograph
signing at is Super Bear like a chain?
I'd never heard of it, but it could have existed back then.
Oh my God. That really made me laugh. I was like, wow, I couldn't tell if that was like a weird thing he fell into or something he actually scheduled because he thought it would be funny and silly, but
he signs
really
that kid's head and goes, now you've got to get that tattooed.
Yeah.
You're an owl head now. Well, Sean, thank you so much for joining us. And before you go, we have to talk about the fact that Wordburglar's got some new music out in the world. Woo! So let's hear. Where can people go check out more music from the Wordburglar?
Well, yeah, just type in Wordburglar. I mean, I have to say the most recent video we spent a lot of time on 1980 Force. You can just the numbers 1980 Force. That is probably my most Weird Al inspired video ever, and it's a parody of action figure toy commercials. So check that out on YouTube, 1980 Force. It's part of a free EP that I've released called The Spinner Rack, which is part 1 in a series I'm doing exploring comic book fandom and action figures and everything around that world, because I worked in comic shop retail and I've been a lifelong comic lover and reader and creator, and kind of taps into that side of things. So if you want to listen to some inside baseball-y comic booky songs, The Spinner Rack, free download. Wordburglar.bandcamp.com. You can download a lot of my music there for Name Your Price. I'm on iTunes, Spotify, all that jazz. And I will shout out my other one quick thing, connection to Weird Al. My good pals, the Cybertronic Spree. If you don't know them, check them out. They did a video cover of Dare to Be Stupid, and they got Weird Al in it. And I'm playing a Weird Al in the video. I have still never met Weird Al, but I am like continuously in these weird situations like this Al Music thing.
You're right there.
And this video where just call me Word Al Burglar.
It's just a matter of time.
If it makes you feel any better, Sean, Matt is on a track with Weird Al and also didn't get to meet him.
I'm on a record with Weird Al. That song that we did with MC Lars that Al is on as well.
Yeah,
but we did it remotely, and so we were never in a room together. But I have a credit next to it, which, again, it seems cooler on paper than it feels to me. Not that it was a great song. I'm very happy to be on it. But again, it was like, they don't do studio recordings like they used to. That's for sure.
No, they don't.
Amazing.
Well, audience, at long last, next week, we will dive into Bad Hair Day with the long-awaited Amish Paradise, and I'm willing to bet it will have pristine, perfect audio with no technical issues whatsoever.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to the Geekscape Network.